Super Smash Bros. Melee will never die because it's one of the best platform fighters ever made.
I will protect my virginity at all costs.
The entire Smash Bros. Series is beloved by fans. It has had enormous success worldwide ever since it released. The first Smash game came out in Japan on January 21st, 1999, and in North America on April 26th the same year. It released for the N64, and little did Nintendo know that this series would go on to become one of their biggest IPs and change the gaming industry forever. But it wasn't until the release of the GameCube where this series truly found its footing and became a phenomenon. The GameCube released in Japan on September 14th, 2001, and in North America in November 18th that same year. And look at it! It's so beautiful and cubed! This was Nintendo's first entirely disc-based console. They dabbled with the idea on the N64 with the N64 disk drive, but doubled down with the release of the GameCube. The unique thing about the GameCube is that it uses mini DVDs instead of your classic DVDs for their game. This was done to prevent copyright issues and reduce manufacturing costs, and they definitely are the weirdest discs on a video game console. Using a smaller DVD meant that game developers could only fit 1.5 gigabytes of information on the disc, which limited a lot of games, but Melee was definitely not one of them. Super Smash Bros. Melee came out on November 21st, 2001 in Japan, and on December 3rd the same year in North America. And this game quickly became the most popular GameCube game ever released. This game sold 7.4 million units throughout the GameCube's life. And compared to the Wii, the GameCube was not a huge success. The GameCube sold 21.7 million units, where the Wii sold 101 million units. This game was a system seller because it took the iconic formula from Smash 64 and added loads of new characters, stages, and items to the game. Super Smash Bros. 64 had a total of 12 playable characters, and Melee decided to over double that and have 26 playable characters on their roster. Granted, a lot of those characters were essentially clones of other characters, but that didn't mean they weren't fun in their own right. Characters like Pikachu and Pichu were essentially the same, with extremely similar movesets and very minimal changes. This was even the case with Captain Falcon and Ganondorf, two characters from entirely separate franchises. You might be asking yourself, why?
What are you, the IRS?
Even if some of the characters were clones, it didn't take away from the charm of having a much bigger roster than the first game. Characters like Roy and Marth never made a US appearance prior to the release of Super Smash Bros. Melee, and introduced fans to the Fire Emblem series for the first time. They even added Mr. Game & Watch to the roster, which was such a confusing thing as a kid, but it's so funny to this day. Even though it isn't popular today, the Game & Watch was really successful for its time, and it's nice to see that it was given some credit in Smash Bros. Even though there were a lot of clones, the entire Melee roster felt fun to play. Even characters like Bowser, who was heavy and slow, felt like they could be at least somewhat viable. Melee also expanded the number of playable stages in the game to 29 stages. Some of these stages are to this day considered some of the best in the series, like the first Final Destination and Yoshi's Story. They even had Pokefloats, which even though it's a crime against humanity, I'll let it slide for today. And the best part is all of the stages had incredible soundtracks to go along with it, which made every game feel like an event and a tribute to the game's source material. You can't look at Hyrule Temple and not think of the iconic song that played. Just like the characters, a lot of these stages are unlocked by doing various things throughout the game, which encourage players to spend time on the game, or complete various challenges to unlock both characters and stages. One way to unlock these characters and stages was to play Adventure Mode, which was looked back upon as one of the best single-player experiences in the entire series. Adventure Mode was just that, an adventure. You pick your character and difficulty and explore the various worlds of these characters in a game mode that was so fun even to this day. You start off in the Mushroom Kingdom, getting an equivalent of Mario, but in Smash Bros. Style, with great attention to detail, which is carried through the entire mode. The iconic areas like Congo Jungle, Brinstar Depths, and F-Zero Grand Prix are all done impeccably and show how much love for the source material there is. One of my favorite memories of this game is playing Adventure Mode with my brother and unlocking Luigi entirely on accident. Little pieces of love like that are what make this game so great. And just like in the first games, Classic Mode makes a return and is just as much fun as it was on the Nintendo 64. In Classic Mode, you battle through 11 stages of different characters and bonus rounds, This mode has a bunch of different battles, like 1 vs 1s, 2 vs 2s, and bonus stages, like break the targets and race to the finish. Once you've completed all of the various challenges on your classic mode run, you are then tasked with fighting the legendary Master Hand. I can't explain the true terror that Master Hand instilled into me as a child. One of Michael Jackson's gloves is floating around shooting lasers and rockets and made me fear white gloves for the rest of my life. Master Hand is the perfect final boss for Smash Bros, not only because it's terrifying to fight against, but also because he can be really challenging depending on your difficulty. There is a much better challenge at the end of the game, but we'll get into that later. To unlock the real final battle of this game, you have to play Event Match, which took the player and put him into unique scenarios with different conditions that needed to be met as both a way to challenge players and to pay respects to the character's source material. There were 51 separate challenges in Melee's event mode, and as you unlock more and more, the more you would get, and the more difficult they would become. This game mode was a great way to unlock different characters and allow for some very fun and unique challenges. After completing all 50 challenges and beating Classic Mode and Adventure Mode at least once, you get the legendary event 51, the Showdown. This was the hardest fight in the game as a kid, and to this day gives me nightmares. You are tasked with winning a 3-stock fight between Ganondorf, Mewtwo, and the legendary Giga Bowser. This fight was overwhelming, but was also an incredible challenge to be the final battle of the game. All of the content in this game makes it something that is infinitely replayable, and something that I've come back to throughout the years so many times. But part of Smash Bros. Melee that sets it apart from the other entries in the series is how perfect it is for a competitive fighting game. Now, I am not a Melee pro by any means. I played in one tournament and came in 3rd place and have never touched it again. But Melee tournaments go as far back as 2002 in California and have been a staple in the competitive fighting landscape ever since it was released. What makes Melee the perfect fighting game is that there are unintended mechanics that the players can use to set themselves apart from others. Dash dancing was the first popularized mechanic that made this game unique. Dash dancing is when you run back and forth extremely quick to make it harder for your opponent to be able to read your next move. This, combined with the infamous wave dashing, perfectly. Wave dashing is a mechanic which allows players to quickly retreat or push into enemies, which not only allowed for unique combos, but also for great escapes and baiting on opponents. These mechanics allowed for people to turn this family-friendly fighting game into an extreme competitive fighter that is known as the peak of the series for competitive play. Melee is not a balanced game by any means, which allowed certain characters like Fox and Falco to shine in ways that others could not compete in. But the imbalance of this game is part of the charm and allowed certain characters to be held to the highest standard and have rates of play that are so much higher than others. Competitive Melee is so complicated that it would take hours of discussion to get into more than just the surface level of gameplay, but what I do know is that Melee's mechanics allowed it to be played at such a high competitive level that even to this day, thousands of people are flocking to tournaments like Genesis and the Smash Summit to test their might on a game that was released over 20 years ago. As time progressed, games like Brawl, Smash for the Wii U and 3DS, and Ultimate did not allow competitive play like Melee does. Nintendo has always been about family-friendly games that are accessible by anyone, and Melee is not that if you know how to play competitively. Brawl introduced the infamous tripping mechanic to prevent people from dash dancing, along with removing the ability to wave dash. This was to create a level of balance in their game that they did not have in Melee. Now, Brawl is anything from balanced, but as time went on and online updates became accessible for Nintendo, they took extreme mechanics from Melee out of the games and made it so it was as family-friendly as possible. This didn't stop players from competing in tournaments, but it made tournaments so that they were less about mechanics and more about game sense. Melee still has a following full of people who see this as the peak of the series, and I wish Nintendo would allow mechanics like this back into the game as an optional mode. Melee did so many things right and was such a good place for Smash Bros. Because not only did it allow casual fans to enjoy the game, but it also allowed competitive players to push the boundaries of what this game was capable of. It's no wonder why this game was the best-selling GameCube game of all time, and families all over the world got to sit down and see their favorite Nintendo characters duke it out on the main stage. This game had something for everybody, like an incredible single-player mode that allowed people to play by themselves, but also have an awesome time, and the incredible multiplayer experience that this game allowed couch co-op to be. The variety of challenges and the respect that was paid to the source material made this game something special in the hearts of gamers all over the world, and is looked upon as the peak of the series to some, even if it wasn't sales-wise. If you made it this far into the video, I want to thank you for watching. I hope that you consider subscribing, and I hope that you and your family have an incredible day.